Hello everybody, my name is Ethan Arrowood. I'm a developer here at HarperDB, and today I'm going to be building out an Astro extension for Harper that will allow us to host and run Astro apps directly in Harper. And this is going to work a lot like the Harper Next.js extension. I'll show the GitHub for that right here. And so we're going to be using this as a reference point for a lot of our work today. I've also done some research ahead of time, checking out the Astro docs. We're most likely going to be leveraging this Astro node integration, which is going to allow us to kind of run Astro apps as a Node.js service. So before even diving in, I wanted to kind of cover what it is we're actually building, maybe from a more high level definition. And that's going to be what's called a Harper component. So, the Harper Next.js component, as I mentioned before, is sort of a good reference point for us as another full stack application framework to support. Components in Harper are pretty complex as I define them here. They're flexible JavaScript based extensions of the highly extensible core Harper platform. They're executed within Harper, and the key aspect is extensibility. The idea is that a component kind of allows you to build or add features to Harper and then leverage that in a repeatable way. You could build an Astro app right now, and you could probably jerry rig it to run on Harper no problem. In fact, if you were using we're going to get to this, if you're using Astro's static site generator, which is one of my favorite parts of the Astro framework, then you might not even have to use this Astro extension. You could likely just publish your statically generated app using the Harper built-in static component, because you could just point it to a directory of the exports of that build, and you're off to the races. Where things get harder is needing to execute JavaScript, server-side rendering for one. That's really why Astro Node is necessary, is so that you can actually plug this into a middleware. That, and this is kind of bleeding over into what we're going to be doing today, is I'm going to be leveraging this middleware piece of the Astro Node extension. The reason why I'm going to do so is because in Harper components, let me go back to the components reference, there is a lot that you have available to you. So I really encourage you to read this documentation about components. It covers everything in exhaustive detail, but I'm going to kind of fast forward to a part that is going to be most important for us. Today, I'm going to be building an extension. Extensions are components, and they're intended to be used by other components. Our Astro app itself is going to be a component that is going to use the Harper Astro extension. So we're going to need, we'll follow all these instructions in a moment, but what I want to fast forward to is the access of the server API docs. So let me get to that. Yes. So more specifically, we're going to be working with a protocol extension today. So this protocol extension is going to have access to the server global. And let's see if this is up to date. Yes, so it is. So great. So this server global is going to be available to us within our extension. This server global provides a method called HTTP. This lets us plug into the Harper HTTP middleware system. And again, all of the docs are here. They're exhaustive. We have some additional ones like socket, WebSocket, including upgrade. I actually use this method actually got created because of the Next.js extension. Being able to support dev mode required handling like WebSocket connections, and particularly the upgrade thing. So you can actually see that here. This is actually a snapshot from the Next.js component. We define a custom upgrade handler where, if the request URL comes from _next, then we know to upgrade. This upgrade handler reference comes from the Next.js app, source code, or from their exports. So then we, pass that through here, and then we upgrade the request via Next.js instead of using our own default upgrade listener. Subject probably for later in this video if we get to it with Astro, if in Astro's dev mode, if it's extensible like that, we'll see. a lot of what we're going to do today is very discovery. I don't know how it's all going to play out. I have an idea, but we're just going to kind of figure it out together. So going back to this, what I meant to say is like with our protocol extension, it's particularly useful for adding custom network handlers. That's exactly what we have to do today. We need to plug into the Astro middleware. We're going to get this handler, and then this one's pretty simple. It just does this app.use SSR handler. So we might need to dig into like what actually is exposed there, to see how we can pass things through. And try to determine like, will this suit our needs? Like, we aren't compatible with Express's use out of the box, I don't think, but there's some other ways we can. I'll demonstrate how in the Next.js app, or the Next.js extension, scroll all the way down to where we do this, where basically in Next.js, you create your app. You call Next. Next is the, you get it from the import of the app itself, the Next app. Then you pass the component path, you pass the directory of your Next app to this function. You get your app, you call app.prepare, then you get a request handler from this get request handler function. Request handler expects, an incoming message, an outgoing message. Like, these are like the Node standard request response objects, and then a URL, like a URL thing. Not too important. The key here is that to handle the incoming Next.js requests, you have to pass them to this request handler. So that's kind of how that all works. You can see here's that upgrade handler part down here. We need to figure out how to essentially do the same thing for Astro. Again, if the Astro extension, if this SSR handler, which I'm hoping kind of works maybe the way this is showing me, where it's like, you get request, response, next. Okay, like maybe that's all that's necessary. I'm not sure. We're gonna have to figure out and see. So, yeah, that's kind of the overview of what I'm developing today. I'm gonna kind of just dive right in and walk us through. On my left-hand side of my screen, I have a basic repo setup. I've only just created an empty package JSON. So to really get started, and I'll kind of bring up our reference point on the side here so we can kind of leverage the new docs. We're building an extension. So, reading through here, it starts off with, we need to get in a config.yaml, and we need to specify an extension module. So let's go ahead and get that started. So config.yaml, extension module, and then we're just going to pass in extension.js. We'll go ahead and create that file as well right now. In the package JSON, I like to add module, type module. That way we get to use ESM. We'll put a version in here just for the sake of, because we're going to eventually publish this. Don't know what else this is going to include just yet, but we're just going to use all this to get started. Inside of the extension, we will do our protocol. So I've skipped over a big section here, the resource extension, but we're going to fast forward. So in protocol extension, you're basically provided two APIs, start and start on main thread. We're going to be focusing on this start method. So export function start. We'll give the options. Basically, anything that is leveraging this Astro extension is going to start off by calling start. And the key for this is that the start method should return a resource extension. And this is kind of how the whole Harper component system works. So now, if we take a step back out and look at our resource extension docs, you can see there's a handful of methods. So the resource extension API consists of 4 methods: handle file, handle directory, setup file, and setup directory. The difference is about where they execute. So handle file will execute on all the worker threads. Meanwhile, setup will only execute on the main thread. Some of this might be changing in the future, and in general, it's best for components to build entirely within the worker threads, because then they can redo work on restarts. If not, and if it's on the main thread, it won't be able to re-execute during restarts only for like full manual, like full service restarts versus just the sort of what we term as like a Harper restart, is where it's just the threads that get redone. So in here for now, we're probably going to implement the handle directory function. And for the handle directory, we'll have the URL path, the absolute path, and then resources. We unlikely will need to use resources, but it's there for us if we need it. I'm going to close that aside for now. This is, again, how the Next.js extension works, so I'll kind of go back over to there. This one has a start method. I do some other useful bits where I, default options to an empty object, and then we kind of resolve the config based on the options. This is a really nifty kind of trick that I'm doing. In here, this resolve config function is really nice. It allows us to kind of provide a level of developer experience that's key. It allows us to assign defaults to things. It allows us to, even there's this whole concept here where I'm using this environment variable. There's a whole CLI for the next extension. I don't know if we're going to build that today, but the idea is like, you do all this options resolution to make sure that all the values are correct. The key one that I'm going to implement right off the bat is we're going to do those ports. So we'll do const config, and then we will put in, port will just be options.port, and then secure port will be options.secure port. I have this assert type in here. We might not copy that just yet. It might just be a little excessive to get started. The idea is that we know that these values need to be here, so we might as well kind of transfer them through. The reason why this is, so simple is maybe, in this case, there's build command, or there's build only, or there's, this dev, there's pre-built mode. Like there's all these things for the Next.js extension that I've added over time. I want to kind of give us that flexibility here as it needs. So, in reality, you could just access options, options.port, but it's better that I just kind of get this going from the beginning. Going back over to this extension, you can see the loggers in here. So the logger actually comes from this is a global. So if we go back to our reference in Harper docs, we go down to here, we go down all the way to the bottom to the reference, globals, open a new tab. You can see we have the logger. There's additional documentation for it. So we can also kind of throw something like that in right now. Let's do that. Let's go ahead and, just for the sake of development, do a little debug, running HarperDB Astro extension. We'll clean this up later. Inside of handle directory, let's do another one. We'll call it we'll just put the name of it, HarperDB Astro, handle directory. And sometimes I like to just, pass in the values. So let's actually make this a template string. And we'll say, URL path and absolute path. So this will allow us to kind of just get a sense of what's getting passed into our extension. Yeah. All right. So what I want to do next, now that we kind of have the skeleton of our app going, I wanted to create an Astro example app that we can kind of leverage. So we're going to go ahead and run this, and I hope this prompts me for a directory. We'll follow this because we're going to create a little example. This thing is always so adorable. Okay, where should we create your new project? We're just going to call it an example. A basic minimal starter. Install dependencies, yes. Initialize a new Git repo, no. While this loads, okay, liftoff confirmed, enter, run, add frameworks using Astro add, cool, stuck, join us. Okay, great. So we're good. So let's cd into our example real quick. And we're actually going to take a quick peek at what's in here. So we've got like a VS Code. I think I might get rid of this. We don't want this in here. That's not important. We have node modules, things installed. We have the public. We have our source directory. Has some more assets. We have a component. We have a layout. We have a page. Great. Your basic Astro app. I assume none of these things are using server-side rendering yet. That's fine. So we're actually gonna, we can explore this app as is to begin with. And then Astro config, yeah, you have your defined config. It's empty. We have all the normal things in here. Let's we're actually going to do HarperDB Astro example like this. Is that going to be allowed? String does not match. Oh, it's because I'm doing two. Maybe something like this, because sometimes we reference the name or the directory name when we deploy components. So I want to make sure that's caught. We have this README. I don't think anything in here is necessary for us, so I'm just going to delete that as well. And we have TypeScript enabled. That's great. Within this example, we are now going to make this a Harper component right off the bat. So we're going to go ahead and create a new config.yaml in here. And we're going to, let's go back to our reference. So let's see how does that work for components. So, we have component configuration here. Custom component configuration. So here you want to add the dependency to package.json. So let's do that. Let's call it at HarperDB Astro, and then we're actually going to do a file reference. So let's open that up in npm. So this is a really cool part for like symlinking. Ooh, the docs for npm are not great. All right, let's make this a little bit bigger for the time being. And then let's go down to dependencies. And you can see there's a ton of different ways you can specify a dependency. This is like one of my favorite things. And we're going to be down here. We're going to use this file one. So we're going to do file, and then we're going to up a directory and /. And that should kind of reference the root of our extension here. I'm not worried about the circular dependency because it should symlink. If this causes an issue, then that's okay. We can pull out this example into a secondary repo and do a similar thing with file references. But in here, let's rerun npm install just so it gets kicked off. Great. If we inspect our node modules folder, we'll see that under Harper Astro, you'll see it's a symlink. That's what that arrow means to this same directory. So it's pretty nifty. From there, we go back to our config.yaml, and we are going to specify that inside of the config YAML of the extension. So we're going to say at HarperDB Astro package at HarperDB Astro. All right, let's make this the right size again. There we go. Now, from here, we also should specify a files. So we're just going to use the /* I think actually, let's try this instead. So that should reference, or actually, let's see if this works. We're going to start with today. We're just going to start with specifying the period, which references like the current directory. So we're telling the HarperDB Astro extension the files that we want you to, also to specify this as files, not file. We want it to look at all of the files that match this path. That's why we have this handle directory function. And there's also why there's like a handle file, because as you can specify paths for this extension, like you could have done maybe like build ****.html. And then you would say like, hey, I want all of the HTML files that are output to be passed to this extension. Okay, so then in here, every single file that matches that pattern would get passed to this handle file function. Similarly, if you have directories, as we do, if we just specify, period, meaning like the current directory, look at this, look at my whole directory. Now, ideally, we should get in our extension the absolute path to this example. So we're just going to kind of run this as it is in its most basic form right now and see how things go. So down here in my terminal, I already have Harper locally. And actually, before I move forward, give me a moment. I'm in another screen, so I'm just going to do a quick reset. I don't normally I have full access to Harper, like source code, because of the sake of this video, where the viewer might not have access to that core unless we open source all of Harper someday. I also am not good. I'm going to pretend I don't have access to it today. So if I come across any bugs or anything issues that would require me to kind of get into Harper core to fix or to understand, I'm going to kind of flag that for myself, and we're going to move on. We're going to figure out a way around it. I just, on the other screen, I just updated Harper to make sure that we're running on the latest version of it that's available on npm, so that the experience here should match generally what you would if you were building it yourself. With that, I can get ready to run HarperDB. So for this, we can go back to our documentation. I have documentation here on how to manage components. So there's a lot of really great ways to do so. I prefer using like this dev or run command. So we're going to actually give that a shot. So we're going to run the HarperDB dev dot within our example, which is a Harper component, and we're going to see what happens. So I'm going to run this. We're going to get a bunch of logs, and we're going to look for some in particular. So right here. So here's our debug log. Well, more so, we have a couple getting started. So running HarperDB Astro extension. So let's actually look at how that went. So right here, that was when the start method got called, which then returns this handle directory. And it turns out that the handle directory one gets called twice. So we have at HarperDB Astro handle directory, the URL path is the base path, and then we get actually undefined, which is interesting behavior. The secret is that the file handling in Harper is getting changed. So we're kind of using what's currently produced, what's currently available. It's going to be updated very, very soon, and it's going to be a lot better. And thus, this path that we pass here might actually work with the period. Right now, it seems to be providing like undefined. And I guess that's a bug of the current form of Harper. That bug is already fixed in an experimental branch. It's not ready yet. So we'll kind of move past that, but we will see in the second log line, we get actually what we expect. We actually get the example path, the path to our repo here. So that's kind of what we're looking for. I want to experiment with some other paths. So let's try star. Let's do a restart. And now we'll see with star, it seems to have matched a number of things. We get example, we get node modules, we get public, we get source. So that seemed to do that's a good glob pattern. It seemed to pretty much match the entirety of this example. So what if there's a couple different ones we can try. What if we just try the /star? This one is also getting changed in upcoming file journeys, but we're still getting a few paths we're not expecting. So I think I'm going to go with the /, or maybe what if we did period /? What does that result in? Okay, this looks better. So here we go, running HarperDB Astro extension. And actually, so real quick, something's been happening this whole time that's been not very obvious. Let me make this a little bit bigger. In this time, you can see all of these logs keep recycling. This is HarperDB's restart feature. So we're running in dev mode right now, which is restarting the worker threads as files change within the directory that I'm running it. It's within this example directory. So as I'm changing this config.yaml, that's why you can see this, reload HarperDB components, changed files, config YAML. We're actually seeing that change happen. And as we change that value, we were seeing different logs because Harper was re-executing the start and the handle directory functions every time the threads restarted. If we were using start on main thread or any of these setup methods like setup file, setup directory, those would not be getting re-executed here. We would actually have to shut down the server and restart it from scratch to get that to work. By building this using our worker thread methods, we're really able to have some major flexibility. So going back to where we were, it looks like by passing or by specifying the period / at least in the way file handling is currently working, we're at least getting 2 calls to handle directory. So that's great. Ideally, we can dedupe that going forward, make sure this only executes once, or that if we execute it twice, whatever we're doing in the handle directory, that it doesn't matter too much. I mean, I'm also just really interested to see how is the Next.js extension currently working. Oh, this is the key. So this is what we're missing. This is my bad. So there is one other piece to resource extensions I've totally blanked on. That's my mistake. So within resource extensions, we're going back to a technical reference. It is documented. I just forgot about it. Within handle directory, let's see, handle directory. That didn't work. Okay, I think our linking is somewhat broken. That's good to know. But within the handle directory definition, so if the function returns or resolves a truthy value, then the component loading sequence will end and no other entries within the directory will be processed. So this is how we deduplicate the execution of handle directory. So now that I've made that change, did we refresh? Oh, it's not refreshing because it's running within, this was the extension. So now I actually have to shut down and restart because the extension code got updated. But now you can see here's our debug running HarperDB Astro extension, debug Harper Astro handle directory only is called once because of the path here. So that's exactly kind of what we want. And I'm sure if I put in like a star here where it was giving us all those subdirectories before, it would still only go once because once it does this first one, once it does its root directory handling, and we return true here, then no other paths will be processed. It will just bail out of file processing. So that's a pretty nifty inclusion here. And that also works in the new file handling. Great. So I'm going to do a quick pause here. Okay, welcome back. So where we left off was evaluating the handling of Harper's component system, digging into resource extensions, or at least the resource extension part of our wider protocol extension, which we're going to be leveraging in this start method. We've referenced a lot of the docs so far, including looking at how the Next.js extension got built. And we're really going to dive into now Node or Astro Node. So let's end the Harper process. Let's just look at what this Astro app is doing on the left. So we're still in there in the current directory of the terminal. If we run npm run build, there's a couple methods we have access to. So we'll see we got, when running build, you get a dist folder _astro. You have an index.html. There's even this .astro directory. I'm not super well versed on what all this does, but I think some of this has to do with this might be for Astro itself. I don't think you have to upload that .astro directory. I don't think it's referenced from anywhere in here. This is some SVGs. And we can look in here and we can see what is referenced in our HTML. Again, I don't think there was any .astros in here. There's the _astro, but that's about it. So right now, this is a static app. So again, as I mentioned before, we have in Harper a component called static. So let me pull that up. We're gonna actually kind of demonstrate that today. Go to components, built in, down to the bottom, static. So this serves files from a directory. So I'd love to actually try this out. So let's just go into here. We're actually going to comment this stuff out, and we're going to do static, then files, and we're going to do dist directory. Now let's see what happens with this. If we run HarperDB, let's just do run instead of dev. Let's see what goes. We don't have any debug logs for static right now. It's a built-in component. But if we go to localhost 9926 / okay, we didn't get anything there. I wonder, oh, we have index.html. Maybe we have to specify that. Let's see. Nope, not yet. Is it on 9925? Nope, that's the studio. Okay, let's take another look at static. Maybe I have to do this still. Maybe we do that. Okay, let's restart. Okay, I'm still not seeing static listed down here. So I'm not entirely sure if the static extension is working as I want it to in this moment, but we're going to keep trying. So we're going to go to localhost 9926 / oh, there we go. That was all I was missing, was that star. So great. So we're running localhost 9926. This is Harper. That's the HTTP endpoint, which is also seemingly, oh, it's right here. Default HTTP 9926. So great. Here we are. We're in Astro. We have our Astro app. It's statically generated. So we're able to actually just run it right from the get-go with static. That's pretty cool. In fact, I would say, like, if I was trying to run an Astro app, or like, you know, if I was trying to run any website that was statically generated, I would just use the built-in static component. You know, from Harper. It's very capable. It's getting some updates soon, along with those other resource changes, which is really exciting. So that's like, you know, right there. If you're doing fully static generated site, let's use that. That said, I know Astro is a little more complex than that, and that Astro actually lets you do server-side rendering, which will not work with static. And that's kind of what we're going to dig into next. As it's just a quick, you know, summary of this section, we've proven that with your most basic of Astro applications, you know, a simple static export, this is all that would be necessary to run your app. But obviously, we're going to be doing something more complicated than that. Actually, I'll just leave this in here just for the sake of reference. Let's go back over here. We'll close out of this. Let's go back to our Astro section. So say this adapter allows Astro to deploy your on-demand rendered routes to node targets. So let's actually go and look at what that means. So your Astro project code must be rendered to HTML. We know that. On-demand rendering at request time is known as server-side rendering. You need adapters. Add an adapter. Enabling on-demand rendering. Great. So let's add an adapter. So inside of our example, we'll kind of go back to our normal screen size. We're going to go and do npx Astro add, and I think it's node. I think that's all I have to pass in. Let's look at this. Yep, Astro add node. Let's see what happens. Yes, go ahead. Great. And astro.config was updated. Continue. Yes. Cool. Wow, very quick. Love that. So you can see we have mode standalone. We're in here. We're just going to start there. Now let's actually demonstrate this. So let's go into our source pages and let's do a new file. I'm just going to call it ssr.astro. We're going to do our 3 lines, export const pre-render equals false. Okay. So yeah, let's read this section actually together. By default, your entire Astro site will be pre-rendered, and static HTML pages will be sent to the browser. However, you may opt out of pre-rendering on any routes that require server rendering. For example, a page that checks for cookies and displays personalized content. So first, add the adapter integration. We've done that. Then add export const pre-render at the top of the page. Cool. So then in here, we're going to go back to HTML. And next, actually, let's see how the index was built. We had the layout. Let's actually use that layout. Let's get a little fancy. Okay, we'll see if that works. Oops, man, my typing is really on point today. Oh, that didn't autocomplete like I wanted it to. Okay, So we have layout. Now, the following example shows opting out of pre-rendering in order to display a random number each time the endpoint is hit. Excellent. Okay, cool. So let's try that. This is an endpoint. Okay. So what if we did this? What if we then did const number equals math.random, like inside of here? And what if we said, h1, we said, SSR page, and then make a p tag, random number, and we did number. Is that, I think that's all you need. So let's actually just run this, npm run dev. Let's just use Astro to check out our app and make sure this kind of works the way we expect it to. Let's go to /SSR and we'll see, okay, great. Random number, SSR page. It's kind of funny. It looks like our layout doesn't actually do anything for us. Oh, yeah, pretty basic. All right, cool. No big deal. I was expecting to get some nice styling. But nonetheless, if we refresh this, we'll see that that number is changing for every refresh. So we're testing right now how Astro just actually works. And this is going to be our reference point for our extension. The Harper extension is like, if the Harper extension can enable exactly this, then we're off to the races. We're doing it right. If the Harper extension doesn't do this, maybe it's serving the same page over and over again, then that means there's something wrong. So we can see here again, it's just doing all the random number generation. Great. Now let's try building this. npm run build. We got a bunch more exports this time. So within the dist folder, there's now a client and there's now a server. Inside of server, there's this entry.mjs. This is actually what we're pointed to in our docs. So there's server mode. So for a highly dynamic app, after adding an adapter, you can set your build output configuration to server. And that server renders all your pages by default. So it works the other way around. Where if the whole app needs to be server rendered all the time, you can do that by default. And then for specifically static pages, you can add pre-render is true instead. That kind of goes into it. This is more of like how I think like Next.js kind of works, where it's like server rendered by default, and then you can kind of some of the pages will be, if depending on what APIs are used, they'll either be server side rendered all the time or they'll be statically generated. This is kind of Astro's form of that, which is really nice. And they have this tip down here, which is like start with static until you're sure most or all your pages. Yeah, it's a great point. I think from a web app perspective, being server side rendered has a performance penalty. Being statically generated is simply the fastest way. If you're just delivering HTML to your user, it's just going to be faster no matter what. As soon as you start getting into dynamic rendering, things get expensive. So I think that's all we need from here, but I want to keep scrolling in this page. I don't think there's anything more. I think that was it for this. Let's go back up to the section or we're in on-demand rendering right now. So let's go back to Astro Node. So we've got our server standalone. I mentioned before we're going to use middleware mode, but I kind of want to just explore what standalone mode works like. So with this, if we just go back to our code here, we do node dist server entry, and we run that. Now our server is running again. If we open up that page, we see we have our Astro app. If we go to SSR, we see it's running all the time. Great. So this is Astro's like built-in standalone server mode. That's really cool that they provide that so easily. And here they describe like you can set a host and a port value. This is pretty cool. I mean, like if you didn't have Harper and you just wanted to run your Astro app as a Node app, like you can do that. You can probably throw this into a Docker container and like do your own hosting. This is actually really incredible. And there's even, there's asset handling. You can specify runtime environment variables. I love this kind of extensibility. We're getting close to kind of like, let's like get into our extension. So let's now instead go to middleware mode. So in middleware mode, we need to specify middleware in the config. So let's do that. Okay, great. I'm going to leave my output on the default, so it's like static. which means that we probably need to be doing some building of our Astro app. We need to keep that in mind. In the next app, we actually have exactly that. We have a build step, we have a serve step, we have pre-built mode, like all that's baked into the extension. So we get to kind of play around with this very similar ideas here today. But now in middleware mode, let's run build again. And we'll see that I don't think if we run this, when you run it, there's no more standalone server. So now instead we have to do this import. And that's going to be our our entry point. So let's go into our extension. Now what I want to do, is this absolute path as we saw before is going to be the root of the Astro app. So let's now try to get access dynamically to this handler. I think the best way to do it, we're just going to call Astro handler equals await import. We're going to do a dynamic import. And we're going to go to the top of our file. Let's do an import join from node path. Down here, this actually needs to be async for me to do await. By the way, all of these starts and handle director methods all could be async, which is really convenient. Async or sync, return a promise, don't return a promise, whatever you want to do. So we're going to do await import here. Actually, I also think in here, what did we do for the Next.js extension? I know there was a pretty cool, so we do create a require of this. That's how you pull the next dependency from the node modules. We might not need that yet. Let's hold off on that. I want to just try to do it this way. So with await import, we need to join the absolute path with dist server entry.mjs. Now, if we got that correct, the Astro handler will have a handler type on it. So maybe we call this Astro entry, and then we do it. We want const Astro handler will be Astro entry dot handler, something like this. So now let's throw the logger.debug in, and we'll do we'll call Astro handler, and we'll maybe let's just see what it does. We can also, for sake, there's no harm in adding more debugs. Let's do the Astro entry as well. So I'm going to run that with Harper. Now, let's see what we get. Okay. Oh, sweet. So, let's see. So Astro entry. Okay, cool. So this is our Astro entry object. We have options, mode, middleware mode, client, and then it actually has a path to the absolute path. That's great. It has the server path, also great. We have host is false, port 4321, assets is _ Astro, trailing slashes ignore, page map empty. Then Astro handler is an async function. This is pretty sweet. I actually printed out the whole function. The whole function source. You spread the args over, request, response, next, locals from your args. If, there's some error handling. Otherwise, you try and you await handler with request, response, next. Amazing. This is exactly what we kind of want. Looking at the code here, I'm noticing that there is some static handling. This is interesting. So it does seem like the Astro handler here is really only for the server-side rendered paths, and that we need to be providing static handling for the client. I wonder if there might be many ways to do this. You can't really call the static component from within this component, but what we could do is we can go back to here to our static, and we can go dist client. So now we're kind of matching what this other app does. So now the dist client is getting passed through. For the rest of the application, though, we need to just do our options.server. So the server actually gets passed in through options as well. Let me go back up to the next app to demonstrate that. So options.server is the same as the global. It's give and take, like which is better to be used. I kind of like doing it by reference, but we can also just leverage the global if we want. But I'm going to stick to what I know. So we're going to do options.server.http. And then this method, let's go back to our reference. It's not looking here. Let's go to the actual Harper docs reference. Globals, go down to server, go to HTTP. Great. So that's this one. And we're going to get our request next, and then a function. I think we just pass everything to it. I don't see why not. We would do Astro handler request. Well, actually, we don't want to do that. We need to get the underscore node request and the request dot underscore node response. And then maybe we pass in next itself. So we actually get to see what this function looks like. So first argument, second argument, the next function. So I kind of like this. I think I like this this kind of first shot. By the way, we don't actually have this referenced in here. We're still iterating on this part. The idea is that the request instance that we have in Harper, the one right here, it's an implementation of the what-wig request class, but it has some additional fields, like because it's based on the node incoming message and outgoing response instances, you have access to those via these pieces. You can see that in the next file as well. We do underscore node request or underscore node response, so we are doing that as well. This might change in the future, but this is kind of just how it currently works. Finally, I want to always provide the port and the secure port that we started our config with. This is an important part to Harper extensions, so that you have full like capability of your system. You can configure this to only listen on a specific port. Like going back to our config YAML, if you wanted to and say, port 9927 instead of the default 9926, you can do so. And then your Astro app is only available on that port. This is a way you can separate multiple components within the larger Harper system. We're going to leave it on its defaults. And honestly, I think that is all we have to do to get started. I'm holding my breath, but let's run this. And let's see what gets spit out. Oh, well, we still got our debugs in there. Let's get rid of some of that. We don't need all of that right now. We know all those things work. Let's just kind of do this. Restart it. I don't want all the nonsense. There's some other noise. Ooh, okay. So here, type error. Reading port. Could not load component for application due to cannot read properties of undefined. Reading port. I have a feeling that config is undefined. Yep. Didn't return config. I bet some of you saw that right from the beginning, like a whole half hour, 40 minutes ago when I first wrote that, and you were like, that's going to be wrong. All right, let's run this instead. Cool. Now, if things work the way we expect it to, if we go to localhost 9926 /, all right, we got an error. Great. That is what we wanted. So could not render /, could not read properties of undefined, reading user from HarperDB Harper server thread server 647, which came from the Astro SSR adapter. So again, we're not going to click into this. We're not going to we're pretending we're not pretending. We don't have access to the internal source code. So we kind of have to debug around this ourselves and try to understand why it didn't work. Looking at the Express and Fastify ones, I'm seeing some, these are using use. We have register as like the Fastify MIDI. So this kind of like, like I'm seeing this, like this is what gave me a thought that like maybe this would be fine. But I guess like maybe it's not, it doesn't work that same way. I'm wondering what is that because it called next? Maybe we don't do that. Maybe we just put an empty function in here. Because if we called next, I guess that gets passed along to other Harper. Our Harper middleware system might not be compatible with the rest of the middleware that this is doing. So now I'm refreshing. I'm hoping to get a different response. Nothing. Okay. Interesting. What if we went to /SSR? Oh, funny. Okay, so the SSR page is working, but not the index. I wonder if that's because we don't support. Huh. I'm wondering that might be a bug in our static handler. Let's see. What if I did something like this, like a star? Okay, the cool part is SSR is working. That's great. That means we've done the Astro node part, but we haven't done the Astro static part. Okay, I think that was it. Here's static. That's awesome. So we have files, and it is serving the static pages. Let's go ahead and add a new page to see if that's true. Let's call it, page2.astro. And we will do our same thing as over here. We're just going to grab the layout. Oops, this one instead. And then layout. Yeah, okay. Thanks, Copilot. And then we're going to do npm run build because we're not building on the server yet, which is fine. We're going to get there. And now let's run it. Cool. And if we go to /page2, welcome to page 2. Let's go to SSR, random number. All right. Well, just like that, we're running Astro. It required a little bit of extra configuration here with the fact that we needed to specify the static, which is pretty interesting. I didn't consider that going into this video. I didn't think we would. I thought static handling would be done by the Astro middleware, but it seems like it's not. That's okay. I think this is a pretty cool method, anyways. It kind of gives me some things to think about with components in Harper, and maybe they should be executable via JS. Like maybe within this extension, we could have something along the lines of maybe like this, like Astro that entry had those fields on it. Where was that? That was up here. It had a path to client as well as server. Yeah, right here. So it had a path to the client. So maybe I could do, maybe there's a future where we do like, Harper dot static, and then we pass in Astro entry dot client, or I think it's like options dot client, something like that. And then it could use the static handler included with Harper on the client directory. That said, this also just makes me think, like, what if we just rebuilt a little bit of the static file hosting that Harper already provides, but we do it within this extension. We have the full capabilities of doing so. So let's go back down to here. Let's go up a directory to our extension. Let's add, I think it's serve static. Yeah, this is the one. So let's do that. npm I serve static. Great. Let's import that at the top. Okay. Am I using that right? Default export instead. Okay. Yeah. Is that all good? It's an old module, so I don't know how it plays with ESM, but it should be fine. I mean, this is showing me a default export, so that's what I expect it to work as. These are all the options. Yeah, examples, just basic stuff. So, yeah, let's do it. Let's get the. Let's do this. Let's move this back so we can reference our code from here. So this is the server handler. Let's do our client handling right here. Const serve static equals, oh, we already have that. So we're just going to call it serve equals serve static. We don't want to do the absolute path. We want to let's actually try to do this based on the entry. I think that's a pretty useful way of doing so. I know we kind of have to reference it this way, but, and I guess we could just do another join here. I don't know what would be the recommended way to do it. I'm going to actually switch. Let's do absolute path this client. We kind of know that that's where it is. If we, from a configuration standpoint, maybe if that's truly configurable, and we see a purpose of doing so, we can add that support later. But let's just go with this for now. From here, we can also do, so here, now we're going to do another options.server.http. We're going to get that request and that next. Okay, this is great. And we are going to do, let's think about this. So we're seeing here, we need to basically pass in, we need to return serve with the request, node response. But then it also has this final handler. I wonder what that means. What is final handler? Because I guess what I'm thinking about is like if the serve method doesn't do what doesn't match, how does it work? Does it just call this function with the same request response? But we kind of don't want that because we need to. I wonder this. I have a feeling this is how this will work, where we actually don't care what it passes back through here. We just want to do this. We want to call next with request instead, something along these lines. If this works, amazing. I will be pleasantly surprised. But let's just go for it. So let's cd back into example. Oops. Now let's do HarperDB run dot. Okay. Let's go back to our app. Let's go to the base route. It seems to work. If we go to page 2, welcome to page 2. If we go to SSR, random number, refresh, it works. Okay. Well, just like that, we've added, the static handling without using the static handler built into Harper. I really do think that's fine because from a usability standpoint, I'd hate for all users to have to constantly specify this extra static thing when in reality all should be necessary is just using the Astro extension. Maybe in the future there's a way that this extension could also use static. I don't know how that would work off the top of my head right now, but it's a really cool thing to consider for like the future of the Harper's component system. But we'll just delete that for good now. We don't need it anymore. More so, I wonder if this would allow this Astro extension to also serve static Astro apps. I think that would work fine too. I don't see why you would want that much overkill. If it's a truly static export, you want to just use the static handler. But anyways, back to reality. One thing we're considering here is that this dist folder exists. So I think this is a good spot in our kind of workflow here to maybe do another pause, another break, and when we come back, we will consider how to add into the build part of all of this, meaning I want to execute the build of the Astro app for the user. And then after that build completes, we want to then, get access to the dist folder and then do all of this serving. So because, referencing back to Next.js extension, we already separate that. We have a serve method, and before that we have this build method. And then within the start itself, we actually kick off by doing if it's in pre-built mode, but the build doesn't exist, we error. If you're not in pre-build mode, we have to build the app, then you serve it. But if you are in pre-built mode, you can just skip that build and you can just go straight to serving it. So we'll probably implement a very similar API for this extension. But with that, I'm going to pause here, and when we go again, we'll dig into building the build part of the Astro extension.